Hello everyone, and welcome to week 1 of the Dashing Dice project. This project is going to be a board game, and not only is it a board game, but it's also going to be our first local multiplayer project. This means you're going to be able to play it with your friends, your siblings, whoever your adult is at home, anybody who's at the same computer as you, you'll be able to play with them. So that's going to be really exciting for us. The first thing that we're going to do is, if you're not already in this layout, if your editor doesn't look like mine, make sure you go up to the layout button up here and choose the tall option. Once you are in this, we're going to talk a little bit about what's featured here in our hierarchy. So the things we're not going to probably want to touch for now are going to be really most of this. Our game manager we're going to be messing with a little bit later. Our canvas we'll be messing with a little bit as well. This tile holder object, we want to make sure that this doesn't get moved either. And then of course our Techability reference we want to make sure stays put. So our first step for this project is going to actually be laying out our board. So what we want to do is, using our little gizmo up here in the top right, we want to figure out which way is the blue Z direction. That is the positive Z axis. So this is the direction that we want our board to move. Our game board is going to be comprised of a bunch of tile prefabs. If you go into the resources folder and go to prefabs and find the tiles folder, you'll see there are these 5 tiles here. We're going to place empty transforms moving outward in any pattern that we please, and that's there's a component that we're going to add to our game manager that's actually going to spawn these tiles randomly, and that's going to be the board on which we play. So the first thing that we need to do is set up those tile transforms. So let's go ahead and in our hierarchy, we're going to create an empty game object. So we right click in that hierarchy panel, select create empty, and we want to actually put this right on the origin. That is to say, we're going to put this empty game object at the 0, 0, 0 position in our world. So with our game object selected, let's go to our transform component and select the X, Y, and Z components of position here to 0. Once we've done that, let's go ahead and rename this object to tile spaces. And this is going to hold all of the transforms for our tiles. Next, what we want to do is right-click on tile spaces and again select create empty. This is going to make a child game object of tile spaces, and this tile is going to represent our start position. So what we want to do is rename this one to start tile. Oops, not start toque, but start tile. There we go. And we also want to add a little bit of visual reference for us on this tile. So next to where we change the name, there's this little square with the drop-down arrow. Let's click on that, and then down here, select the blue circle. It's a little small, but you should see it there. Go ahead and select that. And now you'll see in our game this big blue circle appear at the origin. This is actually just a visual tool for us when we're working in our editor. This is not visual or visible in the game view, but this is just going to help us keep track of where we are or where this transform is in our world. Next, let's go ahead and select our start tile and press Ctrl D to duplicate the object. And we're going to name this object branch 1. Branch 1, just like that. And then let's select that blue circle again and then click the none option in the top right to get rid of that. So the reason we're doing that here for branch 1 is that branch 1 is actually going to hold the first section of our tile transforms. So all of our tiles that are going to be contained within these branches. And these branches can have as many empty transforms on them as we want, but remember that each transform is going to represent a space on our game board. So we're going to make use of these branches to kind of break up our game board into chunks. And this is just going to help us keep things organized, and you'll see when we start generating our tiles that this also helps our script keep things organized. So now that we have that branch 1 component, or game object, excuse me, let's go ahead and right-click on branch 1, and again select the create empty option. And again, we're going to get this object named game object. We can actually just leave it as game object. We don't need to worry about the names of these. If you'd like, you can rename it to something like tile space, but I'm just going to leave mine as game object because their names aren't so important for us here. What we want to do next is, just like we did for the start tile, we're going to select this option here, and then we're going to choose the yellow circle. So now we know blue is our start tile and yellow is our game tiles. The next thing we want to do is move this outward a little bit off of our start tile. So to do that, we're going to make sure we have the game object selected. And then in our scene view, if we don't see these little arrows on our circle, we press the W key. So if you see something like this, you press W, that'll bring up our movement gizmo. And we want to drag that along the blue arrow until there's a good amount of space between our two circles there. And that's going to be the first tile that we can move to. From this point, it's kind of up to you how the board develops. Each branch, is going to contain a certain number of spaces. So what I would recommend doing is maybe making a couple branches of different shapes. And what I mean by shapes is, for example, my first branch is just going to be a straight line. So I'm going to make, let's say, 5 game objects. I'm going to do that by selecting the game object, hitting Control D, dragging this one along the blue line, selecting this object, pressing Control D, once again dragging that along the blue line. Make sure that you're dragging these in order so that the top one is the first one, and then so on. We don't want to get these things out of order because that'll mess with how we move between the tiles. So again, I'm going to select game object 2, and you'll notice when you duplicate an object, it automatically selects the new one. Drag that out in a straight line. And then once again, one more. Now we have 5 tile spaces along this first branch. If we want to double check how the spacing looks on these, we can actually just grab one of our tile prefabs. We'll use the tile empty, and if you drop it right on top of one of those empty game objects, it'll show you how big those tiles are. So actually mine are a little bit close. So what I'm going to go ahead and do is space them out a little bit more. Just drag each one a little further away from the others, just like this. Game object 1. There we go. Our start tile isn't actually going to spawn a tile, so we don't have to worry so much about that one. But now you'll see if I drag a couple of tiles out, I see there's a good amount of space between each one. I'm actually going to even maybe space these out a little bit more so that we can really get, because we're going to decorate our level and we want to put some stuff in between each tile so it kind of looks like we're running through a real world, right? There we go. I think that probably looks good. So now, the reason I mentioned getting specific shapes on our branches is that now, instead of having to constantly make these 5 tiles over and over, I can instead just duplicate branch 1. And now I have a second branch that is this straight line. And I can just move all of these tiles and move them as far up as I'd like to get that spacing correct. And one thing that's cool about the way we will be spawning tiles is that we can also rotate these branches any way we want. So if we want this branch to go up like a hill, we can rotate it by selecting our branch and then pressing the E key to bring up that rotation gizmo. We can turn it left or right. I wouldn't rotate it along the blue axis because our player will not rotate to match that as they move. So we only really want to rotate along that along the green or red axis. And if you want to make sure that your rotation looks good, if you look at your transform component, we want that Z rotation value to always be 0. But if we rotate it along the X or Y rotation, that's fine. Just make sure that Z always stays as 0. So what I'm going to do here for branch 2 is just set this up in a slightly different shape so that I have something else to work with. So I'm going to grab all 3 of my middle transforms here. That's going to be, again, the ones in the middle. And I'm going to move those outward. This is going to make a curved branch. So something like that. And then I'll just select game object 2 and move that over here. So now I've got this nice little curved branch I can use. And now we'll do one more shape. I'm going to duplicate branch 1 again and slide that up to the end of our branch 2 with a little bit of space at the end. And then I'm going to make this one, of course, make sure you rename these to branch 1, 2, 3, and so on. I'm going to make this one a right angle. So I'm going to take our third game object and move it like this, and our fourth game object and move it like this. There we go. So now this branch has this nice right angle to it. Cool. And you're welcome to make as many shapes as you like. But again, keep in mind that each of these circles is going to represent a tile in our game. And the game, I should describe, is just going to be whoever can, you'll roll a dice each turn. Whoever gets to the end of the board first will win. But they must land in the last 3 spaces of our game or our board without rolling over. So if they roll a die higher than what would land them in the last 3 spaces, they will get reset to a point of your choosing. So, as we are laying out our level, keep in mind that we want to have enough spaces that will have, something interesting to play with, but not so many that it takes forever to finish a game. So once you've got some shapes that you like and some stuff defined, let's go ahead and just create our board. Again, you can select each branch that you want to duplicate the shape of, and then press that Control-D key to duplicate it, and go ahead and lay out some branches. I would recommend at least 5, but you can have really as many as you want. So let's go ahead and do that now. I'm going to fast forward it while I do it, and then you'll have a chance to take a look at how my board is set up. Oh yeah, actually, before I turn you loose to actually get started on working on your board, one thing that I do want to point out is that while you're rotating an object, you can actually hold the Control key to snap the rotations. What this will allow you to do is have a clean 90-degree rotation or anything in between that. It jumps in intervals of 15 degrees. So you don't have to worry about trying to turn it to match the rotation and having it be slightly off and then, having a slight turn there. So if you hold the Control or Command key while you rotate an object, it'll turn at those 15-degree intervals. Okay, I'm pretty happy with the way that my board looks. I've got 10 branches here. I actually need to rename my last branch. There we go. So I've got 10 branches here, and that gives me a pretty nicely sized board. I've got some turns, I've got some curves, and we have a long ways from that start position all the way up to our end. So once you've got all of your branches laid out, go ahead and save your scene by pressing the Control or Command key and then tapping S, or by going up to File and hitting the Save button. Once you've got it saved, we're ready to move on to step 2.